All right, guys, I wasn't going to do it, but I decided to do it anyway. Since you guys really enjoyed the civet video I did a few weeks ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and some of you requested I do a video on Castoreum, and I thought I'd put one together for you since I've never done a video on Castoreum, and I wanted to learn and explore and share my knowledge with you guys about this node as well. Find out about Castoreum coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Sebastian talking to you about Castoreum in fragrances. Do you have a favorite Castoreum fragrance? I don't think Castoreum is utilized from the animal anymore. I feel like it's all synthetically created, but they used to take the castor sacs of beavers, and which is located near the anal glands of the beavers, and utilize them in perfumes. And the way it smells, it's very leathery, it's animalic, it's very rich and intense, and it's got woody characteristics, very smoky, a bit tobacco-ish and things like that, and slight sweetness as well. And there's a fragrance called Tabac Blond from the house of Caron, which is a leather fragrance that also utilized Castoreum in the notes. So I'm assuming that's where the name comes from, because they do get tobacco-ish nuances from Castoreum among leather and smoke and things like that. So this is a long-standing fragrance from the early 1900s. I think it was like 1919 when they first created this. It's a leather fragrance. It's sweet and ambery, but not very animalic, but I think it's animalic for sure. But this is the latest incarnation of that fragrance. This is not vintage. Same thing with this fragrance. It's Cuir de Russie, and it's from the house of Chanel. I'm not going to feature these fragrances in the main video, but most likely they used the real thing when they first started creating this. They're both different. There's some sweetness here. It definitely has that Chanel DNA, which I consider very aldehydic. But this is a lot smokier than the Tabac Blond. This is like charred smoky, like toasted smoky. Really, really intense, dark leather fragrance. If you haven't got your nose on Cuir de Russie, I highly recommend you do. Definitely gives you an idea of what Castoreum would smell like in fragrances. But we're going to go to the house of Chanel now and start with a men's fragrance that launched in the early 80s called Antaeus, utilizing Castoreum. But this has been reformulated so much that it doesn't smell as good as it used to, but you can kind of get an idea of how they used it back in the early 80s to create a very popular men's fragrance from a very popular brand, Chanel. It's featuring notes of cistus labdanum with clary sage, patchouli, beeswax, myrtle, sandalwood, castoreum. Sure, it's not going to smell good. For me, I feel like the notes together are not coming together very well. I can smell them very separated. You get an idea of the smell. It's animalic, it's intense, it's got a very 80s powerhouse-like smell. Super, super animalic, super leathery and smoky and also ambery, but I wish it was the OG and I had a vintage bottle of it to give you my thoughts on how it, because I've smelled things with the real thing. And for me, it's kind of like night and day, but it's inhumane to kill the animals to use in fragrances. So they've reformulated the fragrance, obviously. So that's the first fragrance I'm going to talk to you about. It's called Antaeus from the house of Chanel. Next, we're going to the house of Francesca Bianchi. We've got two fragrances back to back from this house. This is Under My Skin. Under My Skin, and the next one is The Lover's Tale, are both very animalic fragrances, and they utilize the DNA of Francesca Bianchi. She definitely loves to use leather, and of course, Castoreum smells like leather. Her fragrances do go smoky, and of course, some of her favorite notes are also, I think, sandalwood, but definitely orris, iris butter, so you get a lot of powdery effect with it. This is so super intense. Oh man, look at the color. Really dark juice, as you can see. Not as dark as the next one, I think. But this is extremely leathery and not very easy to wear. It's sandalwoody, so there's Mysore sandalwood. It's slightly sweet by vanilla, but a lot of orris powder, and there's a lot of balsamic notes in here as well, so it's got an ambery effect. It's a bit old school. I think this one and The Lover's Tale are both kind of on the old school side and very, very animalic. The carnation in here is also shining through, but super potent. I personally don't wear these two fragrances. It's nice to have here to let you guys know about it because it does feature these animalic notes, but most likely, like I said, they're not utilizing the real thing. And if you are in the market for animalic fragrances, I highly recommend you check out Francesca Bianchi fragrances. Not everything is animalic, but she does tend to use a lot of leather in fragrances, so things might come off animalic. Well, this one's actually even darker. Look at this one. This is the lover's tale. So the lover's tale is obviously about lovers and what happens after they've had sex. This is very leathery. It's got castoreum. There's orris, musk, labdanum, honey, heliotrope, oak moss, jasmine, mimosa. This to me is very vintage smelling, but also very, very animalic. It does have a bit of a bandage-like smell. You know how a bandage would smell off of a body kind of a thing. But it's also a bit cuminy on skin. It's not popping through the strip. But once again, super intense, very, very overwhelming, very animalic. Just imagine what sex would smell like. Not during, probably after. Yeah, definitely leather. Like both of those are very leathery. And I think Francesca Bianchi enjoys those kind of notes for her fragrances, and you'll really experiencing them. You'll really experience them. And of course, leather, in addition to the castoreum, is what's giving you that kind of smoky, leathery effect. This next fragrance is not as daring as the previous two, but it is going to the house of Initio. It's Absolute Aphrodisiac. You guys know this one? So in the end, this is kind of a gourmand, but on the animalic side, and that might not be appealing to some folks. I wouldn't say this is a full-on gourmand either. It's a lot of castoreum, so it goes leathery, but there's vanilla, white flowers, amber, and musk. I find this to be delicious. When I first started wearing it, I really, really enjoyed it. But it does get animalic, so wear it a bit on the cooler days. But the vanilla is so super sweet and delicious. It's a bit chocolatey, even though they don't mention chocolate. There's the amber and musk, and I feel like I'm getting that kind of a chocolatey effect, the fact that the castoreum is combined with the vanilla. I really love it, but I think some people might be too sensitive to castoreum and they pick it up more than the vanilla in here. For me, it's more about the vanilla and the way it's blended with the castoreum, but it's super delicious and yummy. But definitely on the daring side. Let me know if you've sampled Absolute Aphrodisiac. Do you get the castoreum in leather? Let me know, add a comment below. All right, I've got two Serge Lutens fragrances back to back. This first one is the Musk's Kubla Khan, which was also featured in the civet video, but it also has castoreum. These bottles by Serge Lutens are not my favorite bottles. I almost, tipped them over here on the table a couple times, and I've got two back-to-back, same size. I wish they kept them in the older bottles, but anyway, this is what we have. Musk Kubla Khan is a musk fragrance that's utilizing a lot of civet, castoreum, and musk. And these three ingredients were the actual animalic ingredients that were used quite a bit. They do use ambergris, which they don't have to kill the animal. The ambergris is washed up on the shore. It's a regurgitation of the whale. And they also have hyrax or hyraceum Africa stone, which is the droppings of that animal. And I'm not going to do a video on hyrax or hyraceum, but we're talking about castoreum today. And if you haven't tried Musk's Kubla Khan, I had a client session here and she loved animalic fragrances. She totally fell in love with that. I think anybody that loves animalic fragrances really falls in love with this fragrance. I don't know what it is. And I have a bit challenging time sometimes when it's warmer. When it's cooler, it smells better because the warmth brings out all of the nooks and crannies of the fragrance. But lots of civet, lots of castoreum. There's ambrette here. In addition to the musk, there's amber, labdanum, rose, caraway, patchouli, vanilla. This one also does come off sweaty on skin. Be warned, it really does smell like the sex experience, like we were talking about earlier, the lover's tale. But this next fragrance I recently purchased from France and I brought back. I absolutely love it. It's Serge Noire from the house of Serge Lutens. Totally different than the previous. I guess it is kind of musky, but this one has a lot of cumin, even though they're not really mentioning the cumin, but it's leathery and ambery and smoky as well. So it has castoreum, incense, laurel note, leather, smoked woods, aromatic notes. And it's interesting. It's very, very animalic, but I was buying this bottle with a friend in Paris. They thought it was way too animalic. So it's interesting the degrees of you can take of animalics. I don't really like animalic fragrances too much, but I absolutely love Serge Noire. This person that I was shopping with loves animalic fragrances, and they complain that this is too animalic. So go figure that out. But this stuff is super, super sexy. The castoreum is there, but not as strong as any of the Francesca Bianchi fragrances, and also much smoother than the Chanel Antaeus. Everything is formed together nicely, smoothly. Nothing is standing out and bothering me when I'm smelling it. But super perfect. And also on skin, you get the cumin. Fantastic fragrance. If you don't know Serge Noire, please check it out. I love it. And the first time I discovered that fragrance was at Barney's here when the fragrance was in the typical Serge Lutens bottles. but they're always moving their fragrances around. It's like you can't keep up. Let's go to the house of Amouage. It's Silver Oud from perfumer Cécile Zerokian. This is a very challenging fragrance for me. It's also quite dark, as you can see. So it's an oud fragrance in the end, but so leathery and animalic, utilizing a lot of castoreum in this. So it's smoky, leathery, but she's also thrown in birch here, cypriol, oud, gaillac. Yeah, throw in a little bit of vanilla to sweeten the thing up as well. It's almost like if you like the smokiness of Cuir de Russie, but you thought it needed more smoke, more charred, a bit of barbecue kind of smell, because birch can do that. That's what you got here. It's got a lot of oud as well, because it's totally there, but it is like one of the most animalic fragrances I think Amouage has ever launched. If you like your animalics, you've got to try Silver Oud. It's not a fragrance I can wear because it's just too much for me. Like maybe my friend who thought Serge Noire was too animalic might enjoy that more, because I think we're a bit off. But this stuff, it's extremely smoky and barbecue charred smelling. And the fact that it has the animalic notes in there, the castoreum, it gives me kind of an unpleasant experience, sadly. Sorry, Cécile, it's not my favorite fragrance. Next, going to the house of Legallion, it's Esthète. You guys familiar with that? So this brand, the bottles have changed. I've had this in my collection for a good almost 10 years. This one's not as daring. It's not as intense, but it does get leathery. It's got oud, it's got gaillac, castoreum, saffron. There's mandarin here, incense, artemisia, jasmine. So in the end, it's a kind of a very wearable take on a leather with castoreum, because you've got the sweeter notes, you've got the musky notes, the floral notes. That artemisia is pretty standout. Saffron accentuates the leather, and it's just a really pleasant fragrance. On skin, it gets a bit more animalic compared to the strip, and just the right amount. I feel like it's even less than something like Serge Noire, and for sure it's less than Muscublicon and those Francesca Bianchi fragrances, but the castoreum accord, or whatever they're using in here to smell like castoreum, is providing a little bit of smokiness, a little bit of intensifying of the leather in here, but providing a slight animalic funk to the fragrance as well. Really wonderful, but it's very bright, so it's not dark. Like this fragrance, oh my god, Silver Oud. It's a night and day difference between Silver Oud and Esthète, and I love Esthète. It's a very sexy fragrance, because it's got some sweetness and things like that in there, which I actually really enjoy. All right, we're going to the house of Sarah Baker next. It's Leopard. Are you guys familiar with Leopard? Leopard is actually a really fun fragrance. It's patchouli, cassis, rose, violets, black pepper, castoreum, beeswax, cardamom, labdanum, musk, frankincense, vetiver, galbanum. To me, it smells like an old vintage feminine makeup smelling fragrance with animalics thrown in, but really nicely done. A lot of patchouli for sure. It's fruity, but if you remember, I mean, the makeup and all that kind of stuff had kind of fruity elements in there as far as the smell goes. And I feel like it's the rose and the violets in this fragrance that's giving us the makeup effect, but really nicely done. I don't think it's very animalic. I also don't think it's very leathery, just the right amount of funk thrown in there with the makeup effect. Very powdery though. Really wonderful offering from Sarah Baker. If you don't know Leopard, check it out. It's giving me vintage vibes for sure, and also makeup smelling fragrance vibes. But the next fragrance is going to the house of Knize Ten. I actually recently visited their boutique in Vienna. Really had a great time there. I bought 2 bottles of perfume. This is my older bottle from 10 years ago, and I actually bought a new bottle of it here. I'm just letting this one macerate in this box because it's a new bottle. Wow, this is having a hard time coming out. So I'll show you right here. So the OG Knize 10 is, oh, the color is so different as you can see. Knize 10 is a vintage style leather fragrance that I'm absolutely head over heels with. I love the Golden Edition more than the OG, and the OG is the one that I was referring to that used the real castoreum. This to me also reminds me a little bit of, I think it's like Royal English leather, which I have a really nice size decant and I've stored away. It reminds me of that, and but there's a buttery kind of a suede-like effect, and it gets a little animalic on skin. It doesn't get too animalic. It gives me the vibes of Tabac Blond as well. And there's a fragrance from the house of Maitre Parfumeur at Gantier that's called Cuir Fetiche. It's also giving me those kind of vibes. So if you like those vintage style leather fragrances, definitely check this one out. I really love the way it smells. It doesn't get very animalic on me, but it's definitely present, and they use the right amount of the Castoreum in here to balance things out with notes like carnation and jasmine. But next, go into the house of Nishane. I've got two back-to-back. It's Mana, and I recently spoke about this in my Nishane video. If you haven't caught that video, please go catch it. It's quite a long video. And in that video, I reacted really positively to this. I think it's a really great creation from the house. It's oud, suede, Turkish rose, castoreum, saffron, gaiac, labdanum, sandalwood, musk, oak moss, olibanum, benzoin, and patchouli. It smells like an animalic Middle Eastern style oud fragrance with an overdose of rose and the castoreum, you know, coming in to give you that slight animalic funk. But once again, it's edited. It's not overdosed with a lot of castoreum and animalic notes. If you can tolerate oud, which I don't consider this to be a very animalic oud, it seems a bit like a Western oud, a very wearable oud. I think this is a fine, fine fragrance in the category of rose oud fragrances. Really wonderfully done by the perfumer Christian Provenzano. So that's Mana. Let me know if you're familiar with that. And then this next fragrance was also featured in the civet video because you've got the best of both worlds of civet and castoreum. This is Africa Olifant. Let me know if you've tried this one. But once again, this is also kind of in that idea of Cuir de Russie a little bit. It's got ambergris, frankincense, myrrh, labdanum, castoreum, civet, oud, muscanone, thibetone, muscone, civetone. There's a lot of these synthetic animalic or musky notes thrown in here, along with the recreation of the real animalic notes of castoreum and civet, plus oud. It does give me a little bit of, you know, Kouros and Antaeus kind of vibes. It's got that kind of powerhouse-like smell. Super animalic, really intense, dark and smoky, leathery for sure. I feel like they really highlight the castoreum in Africa Olifant. If you like that smokiness of the leather that you get from the castoreum, definitely check that one out. Then we're going to the house of Angelos Creations Olfactives. This is Angeliki, and I think this is a limited edition fragrance that he launches once a year, I believe, but it's a really delicious offering. I think this is definitely one of my favorites from this house. And once again, it's got vintage vibes, and he's done a really great job here with this fragrance, and he's not overdoing the animalic notes. There's a lot of castoreum in this with oak moss and wisteria. There's lilac, pomelo, aldehydes, musk, tolu, oud, freesia. It gives me Diaghilev type vibes. It kind of gives me Tabac Blond like vibes. Maybe if Tabac Blond and Diaghilev or Mitsuko kind of had a baby. Going a bit animalic, but just the right amount. It's not overdosed with animalics. It's super sexy. Definitely a fragrance for you guys to try. I think definitely one of my favorite offerings next to Eau de Vertu from this house. This is Angeliki. Let me know if you've tried that one. And then this next one is one of my favorite fragrances from this house and the only fragrance that I really love from this house. This is MDCI's Chypre Palatin. Are you guys familiar with that one? I haven't spoken about this one for a long time. It's so super awesome. It's a Chypre style that's not really smelling like a Chypre. It smells more like an amber or like a balsamic fragrance, but super nicely done by Bertrand Duchaufour. A lot of Tolu balsam here, so it's balsamic, but also very powdery with galbanum, castoreum, oak foam, prunes, benzoin, hyacinth, tangerine. So it's very ambery, balsamic, resinous. So it doesn't really act like a Chypre, but I think the style of the fragrance or the creation of the breakdown is maybe Chypre-like. Oh my God, it's so good, guys. If you love balsamic fragrances, the idea of Tolu balsam, oh, you got to try this. It's so amazing. So, so amazing. One of my favorite fragrances of all time, Chypre Palatin. But next, going to the house of Sammarco. I believe they're making a comeback. I think the brand had left for a while. This is Bond-T. So this is an overwhelming gourmand fragrance, utilizing a lot of chocolate or cacao and patchouli with castoreum. Very animalic. So when I first started wearing this, I guess I was a little anosmic to the castoreum. It wasn't very animalic. It was more gourmand. But later, I started wearing it more, and the animalics really came through. I mean, right now I'm smelling a cross between overdose of animalics with chocolatey patchouli, and there's like, you know, tonka and vanilla thrown in there. Really wonderful fragrance if you can tolerate the animalics. It's so super intense and leathery with the castoreum, and I feel like they've balanced out the cacao and patchouli with the castoreum, so it's like equal amounts, and everything else comes under, like the sweetness and the tonka and the osmanthus note. It's great. It's delicious, but in a funky way. I don't know if you guys know this one, Bond-T. Let me know. Add a comment below. All right, here we have a classic fragrance. That's one of my favorite fragrances launched in the 70s. It's from the house of Caron. Really, from the house of Caron, it's Yatagan. Yatagan is a great fragrance, guys. Let me know if you're familiar with Yatagan. I love this one because it's so much like a forest. Walking through a forest, pine forest, you know, fir forest, and maybe you come across a little patch where an animal kind of urinated or something. So it's giving you that kind of a funk. So it's Castoreum in here, pine, artemisia, oak moss, oak woods, galbanum, basil, mint. So it's very green and very energizing kind of a smell. But the Christmas tree idea might also be there because of the pine, but it's bright. It's so bright. But this one, once you spray it on, that animalic funk with the Castoreum develops. It gets a bit leathery. It gets mossy for sure, but seriously one of the best smells ever. Fragrances are not made like this. Yatagan is so good, guys. If you don't know this one, check it out. Absolutely love that fragrance. It's definitely one of my top fragrances from the 70s, as I said, utilizing the Castoreum. And then this next fragrance is one of my all-time favorite Animalic fragrances. It's Salomé from the house of Papillon Perfumery. If you love Animalics and you haven't tried this, I highly recommend you try it because it's so damn good. So good. This one actually utilizes Castoreum and Hyrax with cumin, jasmine, oak moss, carnation, styrax, tobacco, hay, rose, orange blossom, patchouli, birchwood, bitter orange, bergamot, and vanilla. This to me is like a beefed up version of Bala Versailles from the house of Jean Desprez, which I featured in the civet video. But this one doesn't have civet. It has Castoreum and Hyrax. Hyrax is the Africa stone I was mentioning to you guys about. Hyraceum, it's a very interesting animal, and its droppings are used in perfumes. This also gives me, as I mentioned, it gives me the Jean Desprez Bala Versailles idea, but it gives me a little bit of the idea of something like Kouros and Antaeus as well, but covered up with a lot of Chypre stylings, and it gets kind of ambery and also a little bit like Tabac Blond once again. Not as smoky as Cuir de Russie. This is why I like this one. It's perfectly made, and I love it because it smells so good, and it's not too dark and smoky like Silver Oud and some of the Francesca Bianchi things. It's just perfect. Salomé is one of the best fragrances ever created if you love vintage style fragrances. But let's move on to Jeroboam with Ligno. This to me also gives me vintage vibes. It reminds me of, let's say, something like Balenciaga Pour Homme from the early 90s with an overdose of Castoreum. So it gets kind of very animalic leathery with the Castoreum, but overdose with patchouli. If you haven't tried this, please try it. It is very animalic. I have a review of it on the channel. Go find out more about it. But it's patchouli, ambergris, Castoreum, ambroxan, bergamot, orris butter, pine. Yeah, I mean, it really reminds me of Balenciaga Pour Homme, but overdosed with animalic Castoreum. So it goes leathery, it's funky, but the patchouli in here and the ambery touches, it's giving me that kind of a vibe of what Balenciaga Pour Homme used to smell like. It's really great. There's a bit of a chocolatey effect as well, usually typical with patchouli when you combine it with ambery kind of notes, but so awesome. But it's quite leathery too. So that's Ligno. Solid offering from the house of Jeroboam. All right, next we go into the house of Electimus London. It's patchouli of the underworld. So the brand Electimus London has two fragrances focusing on patchouli. This one's the ferocious animalic one, and then they have Persephone's patchouli, which is a bit green and much easier to wear. This is patchouli with leather, carnation, Castoreum, labdanum, styrax, cistus, black pepper, pink pepper, mandarin. This one definitely gets leathery and spicy and animalic when it's drying down, but it feels like they're trying to recreate something a bit vintage style in a modern way, because it's reminding me of the structure of something like Tabac Blond, but it smells modern, but still animalic in the end. It's definitely not highlighting the patchouli too much as well, because the patchouli is covered up quite a bit, whereas the other fragrance in this collection, Persephone's patchouli, definitely you can smell. This one is covered up. The leather is quite prominent, the Castoreum provides the funk, and then of course you've got smoky notes, ambery notes, and spicy notes in there as well. So that is patchouli of the underworld from the house of Electimus London. And then I'm going to end the list with this last fragrance here. It's Santal Noble from the house of Maitre Parfumeur Gantier. So this was the reformulated version of Santal Noble. I believe they reformulated it in like 2016 or 2017, I think. somewhere around there. It's a really great sandalwood, but it's got Castoreum providing that slight funk and leathery touch that it provides. But there's also coffee here, oak moss, incense, ambergris, vetiver. Really awesome stuff. The coffee is prominent with the sandalwood. It's a nice blend of kind of like a ground coffee with the dusting of the sandalwood note. This is not the creamy variety, but although I think it does get smooth. And then of course you've got some light smoky touches going in. It's gonna get leathery and animalic, and once again giving me the idea of something classic and vintage. And I believe this was OG launched in the 80s, in the late 80s, but they redid it, I think, because I think fragrances ingredients get banned and stuff. But definitely you can highlight, you can smell the Castoreum, it's there, but it's wearable. It's not overwhelming like a lot of other fragrances, like the Silver Oud or some of the Francesca Bianchi fragrances. Even something like Africa Olifant, I find it to be really overwhelming and really difficult to wear. That one you can totally wear. But that's all I have for you guys today with the Castoreum fragrances. Let me know your thoughts on these fragrances and the idea of Castoreum. Do you enjoy the note? If you haven't caught the civet video, please go catch that video as well. But thanks so much for watching today's video. Let me know some of your favorite Castoreum fragrances, and let me know which ones of these sounds great to you. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Also click the bell icon so you'll be notified for future videos. And also please give a thumbs up for this video so it can help with the algorithm. Thanks again, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.